All right, everyone, John Manuel back here at Baseball America, BA Today, along with Allan Simpson, the founder of the magazine. He's also the creator, compiler, and editor of Baseball America's Ultimate Draft Book. 52 years of draft history in here, more than 70,000 players, you said, Allan?
70,000 and some, yep.
That's incredible.
We just went over that 70,000 mark for this year's draft.
That's incredible, and one of the thing that started the baseball draft, the reason that baseball started its draft was bonuses. They'd gotten out of control for amateur free agents. So the signing bonus has just been at the center of draft history for all of its 52 years. And as you were compiling the book, this is a long period of research. One of the things you found was this secret draft bonus record that nobody knew about before.
Well, yeah, it's the original draft record was set by Rick Mundy, the first pick, even though it was 50% or even more or less than Rick Reichardt's from 1964, which really was what triggered the draft.
So Reichard was $205,000 and Mundy was $100,000.
Mundy was $100,000. And I think we actually discovered after the fact that Danny Goodwin's bonus in 1975 was actually $150,000.
Okay.
It had been reported as being $100,000, but we've uncovered that it was $150,000.
The only two-time #1 overall pick, Danny Goodwin, 1971 out of high school, then 4 years later out of Southern.
Absolutely. Now, I think the one you're referencing here is Todd Demeter in 1979. He was. It's a period that the Yankees just were full of themselves with free agency, just having come in and signing a lot of Reggie Jacksons and those kind of free agents, and they wanted to really make an impact in the draft as well. And the problem was, as they signed these major league free agents, they were forfeiting their first-round picks. But their first pick in 1979 was in the second round. It was Todd Demeter, whose father had played in the big leagues. But this was a bonus record of $208,000. Which basically went unreported for the better part of 25 years.
208,000?
208,000.
Okay.
Bill Bordley had probably something else that was largely unreported, because I think the acknowledged bonus record at the time was Bob Horner of $162,000 in 1978. Well, the year later, when Bill Bordley came out of USC as dropping out and was in the January draft, he signed for $200,000. But the quiet one, as you're referencing, is Todd Demeter in the June draft of '79 of $208,000. That record stood for a while.
And that kicked off a really interesting period for the Yankees, where that 4-year period, George Steinbrenner basically was going to try to flex the Yankees' financial muscle, not just with major league free agents, but in the draft as well.
Well, George had a fixation with football to begin with. When
Sure.
he came into baseball, he had been an assistant football coach, I guess it was at Purdue, and just had a fascination with football players. And when you look at some of the drafts of that era, Billy Cannon Jr., whose father was a Heisman Trophy winner, he tried to pull a fast one on all the clubs. It was a third rounder, and he was put out word that he's unsignable. Well, his father at least did, and he fell into the Yankees' lap in the third round that year, but the commissioner's office disqualified that pick. The year later was John Elway with their first pick in the second round, and 1982 was Bo Jackson. So he had a run of prominent NFL or players with NFL names to them. Billy Cannon became a first-round pick of the Dallas Cowboys, but only played one year of NFL football as well.
So you could probably do an NFL draft book, actually, if you wanted to.
Oh yeah, and as we were talking, there's been 8 Heisman Trophy winners that have been
Right.
selected in the baseball draft, but there's a lot of crossover. Obviously, when you're going after the best athletes, you're going to see players that have been drafted mostly in football, to some degree in basketball, and heck, we've even got 3 or 4 hockey players that have been drafted in both football or baseball and hockey.
Every once in a while. But Bo Jackson, it's a famous draft story. I don't think it ever gets old in the retelling, though, Allan. Is Bo Jackson the biggest episode in the history of the draft for you?
Without a doubt. I think if you could highlight the biggest moment in baseball draft history, it was Kansas City in the 4th round taking Bo Jackson, when he had just a couple of months earlier been the #1 overall pick in the NFL draft of Tampa Bay, and the previous fall had been the Heisman Trophy winner.
One of your 8 aforementioned Heismans.
Right, right. So it was a given. Most clubs thought it was completely a given that he was going to football, but Bo being Bo, he just decided that I'm going to confuse everybody. I'm going to do my own thing, and he picked baseball. And if he hadn't gone back and played some football, he would have been legendary. Legendary he was, but even
Right.
more legendary.
And something you mentioned about one of Bo's biggest baseball moments, of course, Ronald Reagan in the booth after he was now the ex-president, but for the 1989 All-Star Game, and Vin Scully and Ronald Reagan going, oh, when Bo Jackson hit that moonshot home run in the first inning. And the Angels had several shots at Bo.
Well, they did. They had in 1986, they had 5 first-round picks, and Larry Himes decided, well, we're not going to be able to sign him anyway, so I'm not going to waste a first-rounder on a guy. Well, unbeknownst to him, Kansas City and Toronto was prepared to draft him as well, and they did draft him. They had kind of an inner the inner hand in terms of that, because Hal Baird,
Right.
the baseball coach, was familiar with the Royals organization,
Okay.
having played in that organization. So they had. And the Kansas City scout that year, Kenny Gonzalez, had very much the inside story. And
Art
scoop
Stewart
that,
always
and Art Stewart,
credits-
obviously,
yeah.
Art Stewart was central to that as well.
But he always
That's the
credits
big story.
Gonzalez.
Yep.
You
Kenny
know,
Gonzalez got to know the mother, and she knew that he was that he would likely go baseball if it worked out. And sure enough, it did.
It's also one of my all-time favorite stories from our friend Tim Wilkin, longtime scout with the Blue Jays, was the area guy when Bo was coming out of high school.
Oh, I've talked to Tim many times about him. He just the best. He would have.
He's a great storyteller. Tim's
Yeah.
a great storyteller, one of my favorite impressions to do, but talking about driving in with his Honda Prelude, but they flew in a coach who was an African-American coach of the Blue Jays organization to drive him into Bo's house, and Tim ducking down on the side of his Honda Prelude and getting in the house, but one of 2 or 3 scouts who got in the house, so it doesn't surprise me that the Blue Jays were in there.
Well, there are multiple angles to the Bo Jackson thing and why teams did and why teams didn't draft him. But that is, in my mind, is the greatest draft story of the bunch.
That's a great story. There's a lot of tragic stories in the draft book. I know I'm not saying the most tragic, but is there one tragic story of a guy not living up to potential, or just the fates kind of being arrayed against the player that sticks out for you?
Well, you know, I think with first-round picks, probably the greatest tragedy will be found in that round, because the sense of expectation of those
Right.
players is significant. And 31% of all first-rounders have never played in the big leagues, and I think they perceive themselves as failures, and to some degree, injuries may have played a significant role in that. But I guess if there's one that comes from 1972 as a player the Brewers drafted in the first round, the 6th pick overall, of first baseman from Southern Illinois by the name of Danny Thomas. He ultimately, his career just for whatever reason, I just went off in a completely different path, and he ultimately killed himself in a jail cell. But it was really a tragic story, and that draft also produced a second first-rounder who also killed himself. It was a fellow by the name of John Harbin that was drafted by the Dodgers. He played football at a small school in South Carolina. That he came out as a first-rounder, and he had torn up his knees playing football. He had only lasted 1 season with the Dodgers, and was so distraught with the direction his baseball career had gone that he ultimately killed himself too.
I mean, there's a lot. There's just with 70,000 players, there's so many different stories: good, bad, ugly, tragic, uplifting.
Plenty of uplifting, but there are some intriguing stories of the other direction as well.
And we tried to capture it. I say we, Allan Simpson tried to capture it all in Baseball America's Ultimate Draft Book. Allan Simpson founded the magazine, a labor of love with your passion for the draft, Allan. It really comes through in the book, came through in these videos that we did, came through in the Baseball America podcast we also recorded today. So thanks, Allan, for dropping by, and thank you for watching here at baseballamerica.com.